Today on the Locked On Vikings podcast, we are going over your sleeper suggestions. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. Show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Today is a day that I look forward to every year, where I am going over your suggestions for day 3 sleepers. I made a little contest out of it. Really exciting. If you want some more traditional draft stuff, go check out the Ultimate Mock Draft. Just search it wherever you find your favorite podcasts, especially on the Odyssey app. That is where all of us Locked On hosts got together, did a mock draft, trades enabled, the whole gig. Listen, I picked on it on Wednesday, so check out who I selected there. See if you like it. Go check that out. For here, this is how this contest is going to work. I asked you all for your day 3 crushes, your late round guys. You sent me a ton. I have 55 names in front of me. I'm going to try to get through all of them in a rapid fire setting. So the way this is going to work is you gave me your guy. If that guy gets selected between round 5 and 7, if they are truly a day 3 draft pick, so no undrafted guys, no second round picks, 5 to 7, no 4th round picks, I will donate $10 to a charity of your choice. Most of you specified that charity. If you did send me a name and didn't specify the charity, please do so. Otherwise, I'm going to have to hound you down, and I don't like that. So let's get into those names. I'm going to break down those names for now, tell you where I would draft them, and hopefully you can get a little bit of insight as to how I do a draft board. It's a little different than the way everybody else does one, and it's going to lead to some different results. So bear with me on that. So I have these in alphabetical order by first name. So the first one comes from Jumpball James, who said Alec Pierce of Cincinnati, wide receiver out of Cincinnati. Now, he has a great body. He has a really good build at like 6'3", like 210, something like that. But he doesn't have the explosiveness, the athletic testing to have like an elite ceiling. He isn't the freaky athlete you usually think of when you think of like a 6'3" NFL wide receiver. And he's raw. Now, So he has to kind of learn. He has the perfect kind of athletic profile to be like a Z receiver, like a wide receiver 2. Kind of guy that just needs to be good enough where you can't leave him on an island with cornerback 2 and be comfortable with that. And he can probably do that, but he has to develop more of a route tree, more deception in his routes, and he has to develop quite a bit in terms of like the nuance and technical aspect of what he does. So he doesn't have the explosiveness to get on the field right away, but he does have special teams ability, a lot of experience as a punt gunner, and that's going to get him on rosters, and that's going to get him developing. So I like his chances to develop into that wide receiver 2 type. I would take him round 5. He's way higher than that on Arif Hassan's consensus board, so I'm lower than him than consensus is, mostly because there's assembly required, and once you assemble it, what you get is not exactly an elite thing. But if I'm going to assemble something to have like a secondary guy that's going to be round 5, he's like 72nd on the consensus board, so there's a very good chance he goes before round 5, and you don't cash here. Next guy is Bamidele Olaseni, who is an offensive lineman from Utah. He has awesome size. He's like 6'6", 315 or something like that. But he is the most hilariously late bloomer ever. The dude is going to be 27 by the time the season starts. That's as old as Garrett Bradbury is, and he was too old when we drafted him 3 years ago. And the other problem is that he only has 1 year of experience. He's like a community college guy, a really interesting story, and the way he got there has a lot more to do with life and a lot less to do with football. But in terms of just like physicality, like, look, the dude is 20. Drafting a 27-year-old is just something that I cannot do. A 27-year-old with 1 year of experience. So he is raw, and he plays raw. And so even though he has all that size and maybe you could develop him, by the time he actually develops into something worthwhile, he's going to be like 30. So there's too much of a ticking clock on a guy like that. So I wouldn't draft him. Next up comes from Chad Peterson. By the way, the last one came from David Whitting. Chad Peterson said Bo Melton out of Rutgers. He is a steady Eddie slot type. He had a 5'11", he's 5'11", and he had a really, really good 3-cone, like a 6'8" 3-cone or something like that. But he can get bullied off the line and stuff. My comp for him was Chad Beebe if he could run more than one route, which is pretty good. I would draft that in the 6th. Zach said Brad Hawkins out of Michigan. He was a steady Eddie safety that wasn't good enough to declare earlier than this, but he was a 5-year starter at Michigan, and he just kind of isn't that good. I don't know. He's experienced. He plays special teams. I wouldn't draft him, but if he came in as an undrafted free agent, I wouldn't hate his chances to sneak onto the roster on special teams, but I'm not drafting a guy for that because I don't think there's much of a ceiling. Forrester says Charleston Rambo out of Miami. He is a very, very small boy. He's got like good routes, but he's 6 foot, 180, and plays exactly that size. He does not play bigger than he is or anything like that. He can get bullied off the line. He struggles in contested catches. All the problems you typically associate with small receivers come in this package. But if he's good at separation, I'll give him a 6th round pick. This is the kind of thing I would toss a 6th rounder at, so sure. Brandon Warren said Cole Turner out of Nevada. I like this guy. He is a solid, big body, tight end 2 or 3 option. He's not quite the blocker I'm looking for. I'm looking for something a little bit more versatile. He's an aggressive blocker, and he has like a good mean streak. He's just kind of only okay at the technical part. So I want him to develop a little bit as a blocker. And then he's just kind of an okay receiver. This is the discount backup tight end, which is fine on the whole. I would take that round 5 and send it and have him compete with the Johnny Munts of the world. But I wouldn't take that any higher than like round 5, but I would do that. Stezo said Cordell Flott out of LSU. He is a rail thin youngster. He's one of the youngest players in the draft. And he's very, very thin. He needs to add some meat. He's like 170 something, I think, maybe 180. He can add meat though. He has the frame for it, but he needs to bulk up, and that's like very, very important. He has college level good athleticism, like for a college player. I don't know if it is still good in the NFL. And he relied on that athleticism. He relied on that speed, and he kind of played in a way that he didn't play technically. He played with recovery speed and kind of overcoming technical things by being more athletic than the receiver he was covering. That kind of thing won't fly in the NFL. He has some good hip turn habits, but there's like tons of assembly required. You have to bulk him up. You have to teach him more technique and stuff like that. If you do that, I think you have a really good player, but there's so much assembly required that I'm saying 7th rounder. Cristiano says Damon Clark out of LSU. He is a linebacker, and he is a super rise and grind type dude. He lost his job in 2020. He actually got benched in 2020 because he was not very good at linebacker. He is very much a technique guy. He's not an athlete at all. He does not have like an NFL athletic profile, but he has really good technique. And if his technique is perfect, he can be a good player, but he has to be perfect every play, and he's not perfect every play. There's still too many problems with instinct or overrunning plays and stuff like that. So you kind of have to do a little bit of assembly. And once you get that assembly, you have a guy that kind of can't afford to make a mistake because he doesn't have the athleticism to have any forgiveness at all. So I'm out on him. He's somebody I'm really, really down on in the consensus board. Consensus board has him top 100, and I wouldn't draft him. So it's just one of those hot takes that I have. Arch says one of hashtag my guys. There's a few in here that are hashtag my guys. Daniel Bellinger, a San Diego State tight end, who's not like a primo route runner. He's not going to kill you with separation, and he doesn't have the kind of like see you speed that you get with some of these elite tight ends, but he's got a big body, and he'll take it where you tell him to take it. And he's a pretty good blocker, and he can get on the field on special teams. That kind of balance is what I am after. He can block, he can catch. He's not a receiving god. He's not a move tight end. I'm not looking for a move tight end. I'm looking for a balanced, backup, rotational guy that's on the field only for 12 personnel, and 75% of those plays are run plays. So I like Daniel Bellinger. I would take him round 4, and that's higher than consensus, I think, pretty much. So I'm really excited about that. The next one actually comes from me, and by the way, my charity is the Sylvia Riviera Law Project. Danny Gray out of SMU. Nobody said him, and I'm saying him. He was not expected to take the number 1 receiving role at SMU, but he did. He's 4.33 speed, and he plays like he has 4.33 speed. He can track a go ball on the sideline. He can run routes reasonably outside of that, but there's a lot of room to grow there. But it's reasonable. Like, he doesn't have to be relegated to a go ball only role, and he can practice and work on those. I am pretty excited. He's a 4th rounder for me. He's not very physical for some weaknesses. He's kind of a lanky frame like a lot of these wide receivers are, and he's had some focus drops, so that's what you got to work on. But that's a 4th rounder for me. That's a guy you can immediately put in and put into a role and can contribute for you right away. I'm a big fan of Danny Gray out of SMU. Sharky the Great says David Aneni out of Houston, 245-pound edge rusher. He's kind of a tweener, and he doesn't have a lot of coverage ability, so he has to either learn coverage or he has to learn pass rush counters at all. He's very much a speed rusher on the outside, and once you get your hands on him, he doesn't really know what to do from there, so you have to build that from scratch, and that's a really, really difficult thing to do on an NFL schedule. There's kind of nothing to subvert the bendy speed part. So it's a very, very long assembly. I said he's DJ Wonnum minus 10 pounds, and I wouldn't draft him. Joe Stanton says Derek Deese Jr. out of San Jose State. He is a tight end with absolutely no athletic traits that I'm excited about at all. He's got a decent body, but he plays with good grit and with good physicality in both blocking and catching. Like he tries, he checks the effort box, but he's kind of all effort, and I just don't really see him ever reaching a point where he's enough of a talent to make an NFL team. I wouldn't draft him. Ben Olsen said Dontario Drummond, a wide receiver out of Ole Miss. He was Matt Corral's favorite slant guy. Kind of, that Ole Miss offense is really hard to evaluate because it was a lot of RPOs and a lot of sort of limited stuff because they had limited talent. Meet the limited talent, Matt Corral and Dontario Drummond. I'm not high on either of them. I don't think he has a lot of dynamicism. He just kind of seems to be like just a guy on the 3rd team in a preseason game. He's a good wide receiver blocker, and maybe there's a path forward there with, making the team based on being useful in run plays and stuff, but there's assembly required just to make the team, and I'm not going to draft him. Next guy on the list is Ed Ingram out of LSU, who's a decent guard. He's probably projects as like a 3rd round guard, so if he does go in the draft, he probably doesn't go in the rounds 5 to 7, but he's off my board because of off field. He has a sexual assault of a minor charge that he was tied up in court for a year. The victim was a minor, so it's all sealed. We can't know what happened to the case. It was just kind of quietly dropped a year later. I don't know if that means innocence or if that means they just decided to stop pursuing it or they ran out of money for legal fees or whatever. I'm not going to get into it. And I kind of just don't want to touch it at all. So he's not on my board, but if he were, he'd probably be like a 3rd rounder. I'll still honor the donation though if he ends up becoming a Viking in rounds 5 to 7. Look, I have so many more players to get to, so I'm going to have to rush through these guys. But let me talk to you first about Shady Rays. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that gives you the features of $200 sunglasses for a fraction of the price. That means polarized lenses, well-constructed, durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. Also, something you won't find anywhere else is Shady Rays' insane protection program. Shady Rays includes lost and broken protection on every pair. They'll send you a brand new pair if you lose them, no matter what happens, so give them a try, and if you don't love them, you pay nothing. Simple as that. Plus, 10 meals are donated to fight hunger in America when you shop with Shady Rays exclusively for our listeners. Head to shadyrays.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON to get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's code LOCKEDON for their best deal of the season. 50% off 2 or more pairs of Shady Ray sunglasses, backed by 150,000 verified 5-star reviews. The other thing I want to talk to you about is Grambling. Boy, if you thought that maybe the Memphis Grizzlies would make a comeback on Thursday night and you bet that on BetOnline's live apparatus, you may have been emotionally hedged against the absolute horrors that the Wolves wrought on you Wolves fans out there. And if you didn't do that, that's where you can do stuff like that. I'm so sorry, Wolves fans. Oh my God. But you can bet on game 4 if you want to do that. You can bet on everything, right? You can bet on hockey. You can bet on the draft prospect over-unders and stuff like that. Derek Stingley, for example, over under 9.5 will his draft number be. So if you think he'll go 12 to the Vikings, that would be over 9.5. And if he's 6, he's under. So you can bet on stuff like that. You can bet on whatever at betonline.net. You can even play your favorite Vegas casino games. You can bet on tennis, golf, whatever. That's betonline.net, where the game starts. Moving on here with this day 3 prospect roundup. I'll get through as many as I can. I don't know if I'm getting through all 55 of them. That may have been a lofty goal, But before we continue on real quick, make sure you check out the Locked On Ultimate Mock Draft presented by Odyssey, and also go subscribe to Locked On NFL Draft, where we'll host all of our live stuff on the actual weekend. Let's go. The next one is Enyi Uwazurike out of Iowa State. He is an absolutely gigantic defensive lineman, 6'6", 315-ish, lined up all over the front. I really like the fit here because of that versatility. He has a little bit of a pad issue. He's got some bad habits to develop out of him, but I think he can make a team really easily off of the bat, and then it's upside from there, and he's kind of a run defending guy. He's like 4th, 5th-ish round to me, and if they ended up getting him in the range that actually cashes out here, I'd be pretty excited. The next guy is Sezi Otomewo. He is totally unmolded clay. He's an edge rusher, 6'5", 280, and really, really flashy. And there's just no pass rush nuance at all. But if you can give him nuance, if you can give him a strategy, get him pass rushing with a plan is what I say a lot. You really, really have something here, but it's a total project. I'm into that. Not until like round 6, but I'm totally into that. Giving him a redshirt year, letting him learn from Daniil Hunter and Zadarius Smith, and then kind of seeing what comes from there. But not till like round 6. The next guy comes from A. Gowan, who is Grant Calcaterra. He is a tight end. He's a good box out tight end, limited blocking reps, so I'm kind of not as into that. And he has a really concerning concussion issue. He actually has retired from football before due to concussions, so it's a lot of risk with not a lot of reward for me to draft, so I wouldn't draft him. Mitchell Dykstra put in Isaac Taylor Stewart, cornerback out of USC. He is another like total flyer type, really good length, really good speed, no idea what he's doing, just like a totally toolsy Devi guy. That is a 6th rounder to me. But if you are more into the tools, he might end up going higher than that. Personally, for somebody, I have no idea if he's even going to become rosterable ever or not. I'm not going to throw more than a 6th at him. Peter Ryan put in Isaiah Polamalu, who is Troy Polamalu's nephew, by the way. And that's about the best thing I have to say about him. He's got a great body type. But at USC, they kind of thought he was going to take a step forward that he didn't really take. And I'm kind of wondering, what does an NFL team do that USC, which is a very good program, couldn't do? So I don't know if there's any developmental in him, and he's barely draftable just on physical tools, just on his body type. Maybe you can sneak him in the 7th round. But if he ended up going undrafted, I wouldn't be too surprised. I would not be very excited to draft him, but maybe I'd toss pick 250 at him if there's nobody else on the board. Isaiah Weston is the next one. It comes from Evan Coop. He is a UNI receiver, Northern Iowa receiver, very big frame, 4.42, but basically he's only a go route guy. Everything else is kind of a disaster waiting to happen. He doesn't have great routes, great separation. He gets a little skittish when there's defenders closing in on him. There's concentration drops and stuff like that. But look, send him on a go route and he'll track the ball over his shoulder and he'll catch that. But when you're a one-trick pony like that, it's really hard to carve out a role on a team. So he needs to kind of learn more. But just on the body type and the go ball, the deep ability and stuff, you throw a 7 at him. Why not? The next one I'm a big fan of is from Nathan Lee. He suggested Jake Ferguson, and a lot of you suggested Jake Ferguson, but Nathan Lee got there first. He was the steadiest of Eddies at Wisconsin. He's totally not the kind of size that you would get enamored with, and I don't really care about that. I'm not worried about, big body catcher type. He can block, and that's what's important to me, and he can catch fine. Can be a guy that just be tall in the red zone. That's fine. He's a tight end 3 type with steady Eddie production, totally the kind of dude that just plays like 5 snaps a game, and that's fine. But he's balanced enough to compete for tight end 2 here on the Vikings, and for that, I will take him round 5. Ben put forth Jake Hummel out of Iowa State, and I'm sorry, Ben, I don't get it. He's like kind of a track star linebacker, like he's really fast, and he's got good instincts, and he explodes toward them, but that's kind of it. He doesn't really have like that instinctive understanding of what's going on in the play. He's just really good at picking a gap and shooting it. And he's not NFL strong. He just does not have NFL level strength. So there's not a lot to work with here unless he gets a lot stronger over an offseason program. And I would not throw a draft pick at a guy that needs that. So I wouldn't draft him. Kurt with 2 C's put out Jalen Wiedermeyer, who's a very weird case. He was kind of supposed to take a huge leap. He was actually seen as a 1st round pick before the season. And then he had a really bad senior season. He's balanced. He's productive. But the combine, he wasn't supposed to have a very athletic combine. He's not like an athletic prospect. And the combine went worse than everybody expected. And it was just a total crater. So I would throw a 7th at him, but I wouldn't do any more than that because it seems like this guy maybe just fooled us for a couple years in college and maybe revealed his true colors senior year. But in case who he was earlier is who he actually is, throw a 7th at him, see if he comes around. Dane Swanson put out Jason Poe out of Mercer, who is a very interesting, maybe the most fascinating guy anybody put out. He was a 0-star fullback recruit that bulked up at in community college to learn how to play right guard. So he's a fullback that has put on so much weight, he's a guard now. He is 300 and it's very maxed out, and I don't think he can safely keep that weight on. So he is going to be a very small, short-armed, easy to defeat guard, but very nimble, very strong. Brugler said maybe move him back to fullback. I think that might be his best chance to win, like to get an NFL job. I wouldn't sniff this dude in the actual draft, but he would be a very interesting camp invite, if only just to talk about the story. Jaden Peavy is the next one, came from 1991, Ford temp enthusiast, who is a Texas A&M defensive tackle, very big guy with tons of quickness. He doesn't quite instinctively have that understanding of leverage. Like, I'd want to sign him up for wrestling if he were still in college so he can get a more instinctive understanding of leverage. Pads get too high and he doesn't do recovery very well. He's a rotational run defensive tackle until proven otherwise. But based on his rareness, if you wanted to draft him, I would get it. Personally, I wouldn't. He just kind of maybe becomes a rotational run guy if you teach him like a lot, but that's too much assembly. So I would call him like a priority undrafted guy. I'd love to bring him into camp and see what I can't do with him. Next up is Jareth Stearns out of Western Kentucky, who is 5'7", 178 and a wide receiver. That is all you need to know about him. He is way too small to be in the NFL, and that's just always going to be his life. He's explosive and he's got a lot of skills, but he's just it's not enough to draft him despite it, like it is with Calvin Austin. He would be another kind of fun camp invite, but I'm not interested in spending any resources on this guy. EJ Alco put forth Jesse Luketa out of Penn State, who's got a good frame, good power and size. He's an edge rusher out of Penn State. So he's got all the kind of physical tools that you would want. My comp to him was George Karlaftis without the redeeming smoothness. Go listen to yesterday's episode if you want to know what I mean there. But Karlaftis kind of isn't the most athletic guy, but there's no wasted movement, and he sort of plays more athletic than he is. Jesse Luketa plays exactly as unathletic as he is, and a lack of smoothness, kind of like clunky pass rush moves, is like his key weakness. But still, run defenders make the team, and he can defend the run, so I would take him in the 5th. But I'm going to move him down around because there's a little bit of a character flag. He's wrapped up in that Penn State hazing lawsuit with all those ugly details. I want to check that out first, so I put him in the 6th round. But if all that stuff checks out, it turns out he's like absolved of wrongdoing or whatever, I'd put him up to the 5th. Next one comes from Gabrielle Greco, who said John Mechie out of Alabama. John Mechie is 58th on the consensus board, so good luck with this guy falling to the 5th, though he does have an ACL injury, and that totally could do it. So for me, it was round 4 with injury. He wins with a lot of technique and grit, and he's not particularly explosive, which actually makes me feel a little bit better about him recovering from the injury in sort of a roundabout way, because he's not relying on athleticism anyways. I get a lot of Hunter Renfrow vibes out of him. Kind of a very grit guy that's not big, that's not explosive, that's not an athlete, but he somehow gets open anyways. That seems to be John Mechie. That kind of thing does not translate to the NFL very often, but I would throw a 5th at it, or a 4th at it. Next up is John Ridgway out of Arkansas, big burly hold your gap defensive tackle. That one comes from Carter Plone. He has absolutely no pass rush to speak of, so he's totally only a run guy. He has some work to do before he's like a starter at that kind of position, but he's good enough to rotate in right away from day one, and if you have a role carved out for you day one, to me, that's a 4th round pick. PDX Toffee put forth Josh Joby out of Alabama, total dog cornerback. He's a 180-pound dude, super spunky, absolutely plays like he's 25 pounds heavier than he is, and I love it. He's got a ton of technical issues, and I think he kind of tops out as a spicy backup, but he's very spicy. He just is way smaller than, or he plays way bigger than he has any right to play, and I think that rules and can make you better than you should be at that size, but that size is still going to get in the way, and he's not technically sound enough to make up for it. So to me, that's a 5th round pick. I have a lot more guys to get through. I will try to get through as many as I can, but first let me talk to you about Built Bar. It is the best tasting protein bar on the planet, covered in 100% chocolate, and it's not going to knock you off the wagon. Like 170 calories in one of these bad boys, like 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein. It's a perfect little midnight snack. If you wake up in the middle of the night craving something sweet, reach for a Built Puffs, perhaps. That's their marshmallowy kind, and it comes in like churro marshmallow. Who doesn't love that? So head on over to built.com Enter promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, all one word. And you can get 15% off of your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. Okay, everyone catch your breath. I am getting through these guys. Slow down the podcast if you have to. Next one is Josh Johnson out of Tulsa. Comes from Ed Donatello, who is a wide receiver who's kind of a shifty slot-only guy with a drops issue. I also compared him to Chad Beebe. It's Chad Beebe with less embarrassing athleticism. But I think he maxes out as like wide receiver 5 roster bubble type. I guess I'd take him in the 7th just because he has enough good route running ability, but there isn't a ton to be excited about here. So I was kind of on the border of whether or not I would draft him. Michael Forcier suggested Josh Thompson out of Texas, who is a bad corner that could become a good corner. Very Chris Boyd-ish like that out of Texas. He's way too physical, and so he gets grabby, he gets penalized, he's panicky, and he can kind of get lured into a bad position and then panic there and kind of turn a little separation into a lot of separation that way. He's not fluid enough to get away with that panickiness, and he has to iron all of that out. But he can make the team on special teams. I would not draft this prospect at all, but if he's an undrafted guy, he makes a team on special teams, there could be a path forward to developing that way. The next one comes from Twilight Jettis, who is the next hashtag my guy. It is Joshua Eziudu out of UNC. Sorry if I botched that pronunciation. He's a left guard, but he played some tackle. There's versatility there. He has the right size and athleticism. He's a little bit raw. He can get his mitts on you, but he doesn't really have a diverse toolbox of footworks or techniques or counters to pass rushes. So, and he's very new to the position. So he also has a little bit of a panicky habit and gets penalized too much. There's definitely like a discipline issue there of just kind of getting him in his habit and not to fall into a bad old habit. But if you iron that out, you have a swing back up, and I'm really into that. I would take him as a high 4th, which is a little bit above where consensus is. I'm high on the guy. The next hashtag my guy is actually next, comes from Tom Freetag, who said JT Woods out of Baylor, who is a super speedy safety with really good instincts. So he can leave a step early and get there a step faster. And that's really, really exciting. And so he got a ton of interceptions at Baylor for that, but he's little, he's not that great in the run game. He doesn't have very good tackling ability. But he played a lot of different roles at Baylor. So I think he actually slots in a very, very comfortable place. And even if he just is a bad tackler for his whole career, you can still kind of carve out a career being that guy. So I would take that in round 4, very similar to where Cameron Bynum is, and he becomes competition for Cam Bynum. Can Cam Bynum beat that guy out? Becomes the question. Basque put out the next one, who is Kalen Barnes out of Baylor, another Baylor DB, 4.23 speed, just absolutely insane speed, but he sort of relies on it too much, and he needs to learn not to bank on that recovery speed and to have better hip transitions and stuff like that. He's a little too easy to fool. He's a little bit too eager to use that speed and try to jump on something, and so reasonably deceptive routes can kind of get him totally turned around. So he needs a little bit of experience. He's a 1-year starter, and I think he just needs to get beat a few times in a safe environment and learn from that. So I'd toss a 6th round at him, put him on the 2nd team or the 3rd team, let him get beaten preseason a little bit and hope he develops from that and see if he can't make a team. The next one is Purple Zato, who put forth Luke Fortner out of Kentucky, who is a very tough, smart guard. He's a little small and he can get overpowered, but he has enough length to help himself out with that. We kind of talked about that in the Linderbaum episode earlier this week. Also, he's 24, and that's not great for a draft prospect. But I would still take him late day 2, to be honest. And I think if you get him in day 3, it's a coup. I really like him as a prospect. I actually think he should go way before the parameters of this contest. Look, I didn't make it, y'all. I got like 20 names left. I'm not going to get there. There's 55 prospects here. I'll release the names on Twitter on Friday, so you guys can see it and you guys will know kind of where everybody stands. Submissions are closed for now, but if you didn't put in a charity, please tell me your charity. But that's as far as we get. Hopefully that got you some sleepers, some people that you're really excited about. Sorry for the rapid fire speed of that. You might have to slow this one down. But I will talk to you next week. We'll do the final mock draft Monday. No holds barred, no restrictions. No, I can't take this guy because I took him last time. We'll do our final Twitter Tuesday before the draft, and then we're like basically there. A couple of quick cram sessions, and that's it. So there's a lot of volume. The problem with the draft is there's 500 people, and I kind of don't want anybody to be too much of a mystery. So we go a little quick on these, and I'm sorry for that, but I hope you guys could keep up. I will see you all next week. We'll do a mock draft, see if we can get into more of these names too if we get a little bit of time. And as always, Skol.